Okay, I think we're recording. Cool. Yes. Okay. Hi, my name is Kelly Kane, and I have my two viewers, Megan and Jessica, on this presentation. So I'm an apparel entrepreneurship major, and I did my capstone on a retro winter coat line. Here's my poster for it. So I want to start off by talking about my goals that I had for this project. And my first goal was just to really develop my portfolio, because in my major, with any job that we apply to, we have to have a portfolio to show our work and demonstrate our skills in design and how we construct clothes and just our knowledge of clothing details in general. So that was my main goal with this project, and also just to work with patterning for different body types, because that's something I've never really done before. So I decided to do it for two different girls, both different heights and weights, and then one male who I've actually never patterned for a male before, so it was kind of cool to jump into that aspect, because women and male bodies are definitely different with the way we're built, so it was interesting to pattern all that thing. So my process for this is I would start out by measuring my three models. So I started out by just taking a chart, and I would measure around their busts, their hips, their arm lengths, how far down they wanted it, shoulder widths, back length, all those good things. And I would take those numbers, enter them in, and then get an average on the sizing chart with just like the normal US standards, and see what size they would generally be. And then from there, I would go into sketching. So I like to just kind of sketch as I go. So I just kind of would just take little images of it that came into my head, and then do little designs and kind of label like what fabrics I would maybe want, how I'd want the designs to look. Because since this is a coat line, they all need to have a unique look, but they also all need to be cohesive together and work, so that when they go down the runway or people see them outside, they can see who the designer is and what their kind of design style is in that. Next, I would go into patterning for them. So for each one, I started out with a basic sloper, and a sloper is just a tight-fitting garment piece, basically. You can make it out of muslin. I just stuck with tissue, and I would pin fit it. So I'd take the tissue up to their body and pin around the armholes and the side seam, just to make sure that it was matching center front and center back, to just make sure that I had the sizing right, so that when I patterned an actual coat, it wouldn't be the completely wrong size for them. From there, I started making the actual coat pattern pieces. I would start with one coat, and I would work all the way through until I finished it, and then I would start the next coat, do patterning, sewing, and that process all over again. So this is an example of one pattern piece. These are all color blocked coats, so I had to really number block each piece and make sure that I knew what fabric I was cutting out of and where the piece went with all the others, because some of them looked pretty similar. So I would just name what it was with the backside, what coat it was, how many to cut, and what material, the grain line, my name, and then the date, and how much the seam allowance was. And on all these coats, I did a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just to give me some room in case I needed extra ease and things, which is the main part of this patterning for coats. So for coats, they're all a boxy look, and they can't be tight fitting, and I wanted all mine to kind of have that retro loose fitting feel, so I added a lot of ease into each coat, and ease is just the amount of extra room that you have for the garment to flow around your body. After patterning, I went right into fitting. So I'd take that pattern from the coat and not the sloper anymore, and I'd fit it on them and make sure that it fit their arm lengths and just the size, basically, just to see if it would like not completely rip along their armholes, because that's a good sign to see if it's not fitting right or anything like that. And once I had that size down, I would go right in to cutting out the fabric. So once I altered the pattern piece, make sure that it fit them, I would go in, and then here are some of the samples of the fabric that I used. I wanted to use corduroy just because it's something like that had a retro look to it. It's really fun to mess around with when you're sewing it, because it has different drapes, and it's a thicker material, so that works really good for coats. So I did that. I wanted neutral tones that all work together. I also used a white jean, and then for the men's coat, I used a blue polyester cotton mix that had a different feel to it too, but they were all the neutral tones as well. They all tied together and also had a look that kind of stood out a little bit more with the color blocking that I did, because it's something that you're not going to see on a lot of other coats as well. So once I cut them out, I then began to sew it. And what I would do is I would first sew the outer layer of the coat, so the outer shell basically. I'd piece all the pattern pieces together, sew them, and then I would top stitch them along the seams. It just gives it more of a professional feel and makes it look more put together overall, so it doesn't really look like a homemade piece. And then after that, I would go straight into the lining. The lining is all out of a jersey knit material, as you will see. And I attached that to some polyester batting, so that was the inner lining. So that would keep you super warm. It feels like a hoodie when you put the coat on, which is exactly how I wanted it to feel, because I'm a designer who's all about comfort. And then after that, I finally would fit their arm lengths and hem lengths, because once you do a garment, it's really easy for it to get off a little bit in measurements, or a pattern piece tissue paper doesn't fit the same way that a garment would with actual fabric. So I'd go in, measure their cuff lengths and their hem lengths, and make sure that those all fit perfectly and just right for their body types. So I'll show you some of the finished pieces. This is the first coat. So as you can tell, it has color blocking on the front. I did a yoke and then a front panel of the green corduroy, a side panel of the white jean, and then an inner one of the brown corduroy. And then on the sleeve, I did a triangle design. So that just goes all the way down. The collar's in brown, and I did a little coat hook on it. And then for the front button band, I did it in white jean with gold buttons down the front of it. For closures, along all these seams, I did top stitching. So that just keeps the seams down and also makes it look more professional and well pressed. And on the back, this one is just solid green because I wanted to keep it more basic and just look really clean cut. And on the inner part, it's a gray knit material, and I just slip stitched the neckline by hand just because it was easier than turning the material after machine sewing it, since it was really thick. So that's the first coat. My second coat is a cropped one. Has a similar look but different design style to it. So this one has the triangles on the front instead of the sleeve like the second one, with some brown corduroy, and then the white jean along with the top stitching. I did a yoke on this one as well, along with a bigger loose floppy collar. The sleeves are just the red corduroy, and then on the back I did a big triangle. I did a waistband on this one with the white jean, and I just top stitched it. And then for the front, I just did brown corduroy along this just to keep it kind of cool, and I felt like the jean was a little bit too thick since there was a lot of white on it. I wanted to switch it up and do the brown corduroy on that. The inside is the same gray knit along with the same batting underneath, and I did the same process to close this one as well. On my last coat, this is for the male, I did a hood along with a collar underneath. This is just kind of cool to have it convertible so you can have your hood up but also still have the collar popping out, or you could just let it overhang and it'll keep the hood perched up. I did a shoulder panel of a tie-dye material, and then the rest is just the solid navy color. As you can tell, there's a stripe on the sleeve and it matches the stripe on the front of the coat. So those all line up, and then I did 2 pockets on this one, each with a button, but they're actually Velcroed open just because that's easier access, especially when you're in the cold and trying to stick your hands in your pocket really quick. And then this one has a light blue jersey knit lining, and this one I attached the same way with the same batting underneath. I did buttonholes on this band, and then on this band I just did buttons all the way down, and that's how I did that closure. This one hits down on half of your thigh. This one's cropped and hits your waistline, and the first coat just hits about the normal waist area. So they each have a different length and vary in that. I was really happy with my project results. I think that it really showed my skills. It demonstrated how I can work with different body types, and I think that'll be really great to show to future jobs that I'm applying for, and demonstrated my skills. I really like that I was able to show my design aesthetic and show off what I really want to do in the future. So I'll open it up to you guys for some questions now.
Do you want me to go first or
Sure.
Jessica? I'll go first. What do you think was the most difficult thing between like a men's coat and a woman's coat? Because you mentioned like different body types.
Yeah.
Like, what was the most difficult thing?
I think it's definitely with the shoulder and bust area, because even though as women we're like a little bit narrower, we are wider along the bust area because men don't have that bust line. But there are a lot of thicker bone and muscle. So even though he may have looked smaller, it was deceiving because the first pattern piece I put on him was way too small because I didn't like acknowledge the fact that men do have that muscle and extra thickness and bone in that area. So that was kind of interesting to work with, just with the shoulders and the whole top half of your body, and how it may look to be smaller, but when you're actually putting a garment piece on, it can be a little deceiving with how big it actually is.
Sweet.
Jessica? Yeah.
You might.
Yeah. I definitely think that the color blocking was a little bit tricky because I'd cut pieces out and then it'd look the same as the other pieces. So numbering helped a lot with that. I did like doing the just two colors on the men's coat and keeping it very simple with how I just did the stripes on it, because I think that's a lot simpler for a men's look rather than having the crazy triangles. Overall, if I like kept little piles organized for each fabric, I was able to keep it pretty good with knowing what went where and making sure that I just did one coat at a time, because if I was cutting all the fabric out at once, I definitely would have had the opportunity to lose pieces or have pieces not turn out as accurate as I wanted to, because if you're cutting a piece perfectly, that makes the sewing process a lot easier because you're not trying to match up jagged edges and things like that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.